What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Uncensored Critic podcast. Thank you, as always, for tuning in. I really appreciate it. Thank you, as always, for your time. Today, we welcome along a fantastic director under the name of Jane Moriarty. Jane is a director for film and for theatre. Let's just take a moment to introduce Jane. Jane was a finalist in both the GMK Directors Awards in 2019 and the Genesis Future Director Awards at the Young Vic in 2018. She trained at Mountview after achieving her undergrad in English, Drama and Theatre Studies at the University of Cork. As a director in the theatre, she has worked on Rougher Theatre Parts 1 and 2 by Samuel Beckett as part of the National Theatre Studio, for which she was resident director between 2016, 2017 and 2021, the Apologists in Sydney and the Vault Festival in 2019, Burn It Down at the Theatre Royal Stratford East. And as an associate director, she's been a part of a number of projects, including Taming of the Shrew at the Globe, Christmas Truce in Queen Anne with the RSC, Birthday Party at the Birthday Party at the Howard Pinter Theatre, directed by Ian Rickson, The Inheritance, directed by Stephen Daldry at the Noel Coward, and Prima Facie, also at the Howard Pinter, directed by Justin Martin. And Jane is also a prolific filmmaker, having made her own films in the last few years. Her debut short film, Kitchen Tales, premiered at the Newport Beach Film Festival in 2021 with music by Oscar-winning composer Stephen Warbeck. Also, another film, I Called You, which is now out and about there doing the festival runs. And also, she was also part of the documentary team on the 2021 Broadway transfer of the Layman trilogy, directed by the great Sam Mendes. More information about her work and any other questions you have for her and contact details are available on her website, janemoriarty.com. Link is down below in the description, so go check that out. So, without further ado, Jane, welcome.
Thank you, Oliver. Thanks so much for having me on and for digging through all of my CV to figure out some things to tell people about.
Oh, it's lovely. That's just a small sample of your CV. I could have gone for ages. You've gone on your website. It's like credit, 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 credit. You've gone so much.
Well, I try to just keep working.
Yeah.
And we're lucky, I suppose, in our industry that there are so many creative voices to inspire us. I love working with writers, actors, designers. Like it's a real privilege to do what we do.
Yeah, it really, really is. And yeah, it's a pleasure to talk to you today. So we start at the beginning with every guest. To begin at the beginning, where did it come from? The love of the arts and directing. Where did it come from?
It came quite instinctively. I wouldn't say that so I'm from Cork in the very south of Ireland, and there are some really creative people. And I was part of a youth theatre, which was great. But there isn't a huge amount of professional theatre happening in Cork. And so, you're kind of figuring it out what you enjoy doing. And actually, I did quite a lot of music. And there was a moment in my teenage years where I was doing like, this sounds super nerdy. It's basically band camp. Like I played violin and I was at this summer course for string musicians, and this company from the UK came over and were artists in residence. They were called the Gogmagogs, and they were all string musicians, and they worked with a theatre director called Lucy Bailey, who people might recognise. And we were all sat in this school where we were doing this music course, and we were in the sports hall, and they were trying to give us an impression of the kind of work that they made. So they were like, for example, we could just play a game of basketball. So they picked up their instruments, they stood up, and they literally were like, vroom, 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 vroom. So you could see them like dribbling and passing the ball, but like on cello, on violin. There was no actual ball. I'm trying to paint a visual picture for the listeners. But it just suddenly was kind of this mind-blowing moment where I was like, oh, you can like have this kind of cross-disciplinary expression. And it was basically, I suppose you'd call it physical instrumental theatre.
Mm.
So just to jump forward, when I moved to London to go to Mountview and do the directing course there, I contacted Lucy Bailey and I said, are you still making work with these musicians? And she said, I'm not, but I've just opened a theatre and come down and meet me and blah, blah. And I ended up being an assistant director to Lucy Bailey. So that was a lovely kind of full circle moment after I moved to London. But yeah, then I kind of figured out I wanted to do something with people.
Mm.
So theatre was, yeah, it's, super collaborative. So I just went to my local university and studied theatre. But then I got the opportunity to go abroad for a year. So I went to Berkeley in California. And at the university there, they had more vocational kind of conservatory style, directing, stage management, acting classes, as opposed to the sort of European practice that we were doing in UCC. And so that's where I really got the bug and realized, oh, I'm a director. Like it was like falling in love, to be honest. I just loved that relationship with actors. I loved, that relationship with text and music and staging and bringing all the elements together. And mainly I realized that's the most direct way that I want to have a conversation with an audience is that's how I can do it, by kind of figuring out how all these elements conform to what's in my imagination and what I want to express. So once I spent a year in Berkeley, I then started applying to drama schools and moved to London.
Fantastic.
So that was like how I started. I mean, that isn't even how I started working, but that's how I kind of found my way to training and stuff like that.
Brilliant. So we mentioned training there. Tell me about Mountview. What was your experience like there?
I had a really good time because I really got on with my directing tutor. And I think in a discipline, in a whatever practice craft like directing, it's so subjective. And so, yeah, I was really lucky that we got on and she understood what I was the kind of work I was interested in and how to support me and challenge me. That was in the days when Mountview was at Wood Green and it was like shitty industrial setting. But I kind of loved that it was so like they've amazing facilities now in Peckham, and I've gone back and directed there.
Yeah.
But like what we had in Wood Green was so unglamorous and squeaky and noisy and blocked toilets, and you could hear everything that was going on. There always seemed to be an animal studies class happening overhead. Yeah, and I made, friends with a lot of the actors who were training there, who I've worked with since and have become collaborators on short films now. So a lot of things that, are the seeds that, the seeds of later work were planted that I didn't even realize, because I didn't like work as a director. You kind of go off and forge your own path, but yeah, now I'm coming back and working with a lot of those actors.
Fantastic. So you mentioned there about conversations that you want to have with an audience. What sort of conversations would you like to have with audiences in the future?
I mean, loads. I feel like I have a lot to say. So I won't cover it all. It's sort of about provoking people to reflect on how their actions reflect their feelings about the world, I suppose. So I'm feminist, so I like to put work that champions women's voices and underrepresented issues around that. So yeah, like Prima Facie, but also the play that you mentioned that went to Sydney that we started in the Vault Festival was The Apologists. That was like really interesting triptych of three different women and their experience of apologizing in public. Yeah, and there's like the project that I've got lined up. I mean, to be honest, I don't have a big manifesto as to what kind of stories I want to tell. It's just very personal. Do I have an emotional connection to it? Does it align with my values? Those kind of things. And like great writing, great stories.
Yeah. Is there a play but there's many plays I'm sure you'd love to do, but is there one in particular that is on your bucket list, like to be the director?
There are a lot. I mean, I like working with writers, so the stuff that I'm trying to develop now is actually a lot of original. So there's some things that I'm actually writing or creating with a view to partnering with a writer. So they're not non-existent plays. You know what I mean? I think new writing is really where I want to go. I don't think I could hold up one play and say this is the pinnacle of my taste, because
Yeah.
thankfully a bit broader taste than that, as most people do. Yeah. So the stories that are yet to be told, Oliver.
Yet to be told. Okay. we'll get to that. We'll get to that further down the line, I'm sure. So it's always interesting to me about one thing when I talk to people about on this podcast is about just about everything all the elements that make a show. It's not just the performers or performer. It's backstage, it's the director, it's the producer, it's the whole group of people to make this thing work. And so when I got in touch with you about being an associate director, I immediately thought, you hear about all these directors, like the various titles, but I had no idea what does that mean to be an associate director?
It's and as an associate director, you're a director on the creative team. You're working really closely with the director, the lead director,
Hmm.
um, to make the show the best it can be, according to, I suppose, their directorial vision. So it's not your vision necessarily, although you can be, and with the directors that I'm working with these days, Justin Martin, primarily, and also Stephen Daldry, they're very much inclusive in their, building of a show, and it's kind of like best idea wins. They're not precious about where that idea comes from.
Yeah. Oh, it's interesting because there's all the creative elements in a way, and like you mentioned there, you can still have a say in the overall piece that is or that is the final product that gets produced in front of audiences and everything. Is there kind of one thing that you've done in productions in the past which wasn't there originally, but it was one of your suggestions which made it into the final bit?
I mean, yeah, absolutely, but I can't remember. And also, it's not fair for me to go, oh, that bit was my idea, because at the same time, I probably suggested 20 other ideas that didn't make it in. So it's really all filtered through
Yeah, of course.
taste ultimately. But I suppose on a more pragmatic level, one of the um, responsibilities that you might have as an associate or resident or is like understudy. So that's what I've done as well in the past, is like casting, rehearsing, directing the understudies.
Yeah.
Um, and also you're looking after the show after press night, when the director's finished,
Mm.
um, which can be very involving or can be very easy and fluid, depending on, lots of things can happen on a show. And yeah, but I think when you spoke to Justin Martin on an earlier episode of your podcast, he gave a really clear kind of outline of what those different directing roles are. So I would refer people to that other episode.
Thank you for that.
And, and worked with lots of associate, resident, and assistant directors. And
Mm.
it also, each job will be defined by the job itself. But there are sort of broad definitions that you can follow.
Yeah. I just want to ask you quickly about because you've worked on plays with some, classic playwrights, some of the greatest of our generation, Samuel Beckett, Harold Pinter, and and you directed Rough Theatre as part of your tenure at the National Theatre Studio and everything. And a lot of people have this opinion of Beckett, like he's unreachable, you can't figure him out, he's impossible, blah blah blah. But then actually, when you watch Beckett, you realize, oh, it makes so much more sense than I thought it does. What was
I'm
your?
really glad that you like Beckett. I
Oh
really
yeah,
like,
absolutely.
but I'm
Yeah,
not going to evangelize to people for him. Like, absolutely, that's not for him. And also, it sounds like all I do is the old white guy's place. That's not true at all. I mostly work with female writers, contemporary writers. But I suppose it's one of those things where, in the canon of 20th century and older theatre, that's what we've got. We've got a lot of old white guys.
that's very true.
Are really, really brilliant, and we can learn a lot, and we speak their language for better or for worse now. That, like, that's, and Beckett specifically for me is a part of the heritage of Irish theatre and the evolution of those voices
Of
through,
course.
in the Walsh, I would say, is kind of um, a descendant of Beckett, or it's this whole thing. There's a different tradition of storytelling, a different tradition of playwriting from Ireland than there is here, and that all makes sense. But there's more overt existentialism, I would say,
Oh,
and
hugely.
more opportunity for the tradition of storytelling to be part of playwriting, by which I mean like literally the act of telling a story, like a character telling a story on stage, which
Mm.
happens, or the process of telling a story will be part of how that character exists in a theatrical um, world, dimension, form. I don't want to get too like academic about it. But yeah. So what I'm drawn to is that with Beckett is like the rhythm, the dialogue, like just getting, if you like, it's like a piece of music. So if you
Yeah.
kind of explore it like that and follow the rhythm of it, it reveals a lot to you. And I think it's the same with Pinter. Yeah, I worked on The Birthday Party, which Ian Rickson directed, and that was with a really, really wonderful cast of actors, Toby Jones and Zoe Wanamaker, and
Yeah.
others, Steve Mangan. Um, yeah, but the rhythm of it is like, and that comes back to the, I was saying my kind of way into theatre was through music, so I'm really drawn to,
Mm.
putting a musical filter on your brain when you're absorbing scripts. Yeah.
And fantastic. I don't think I've asked you this. Well, what can you play? What instruments can you play?
Oh, I could play piano and violin.
Okay.
Um, but look, I don't consider myself a musician. I feel like I
Yeah,
can
sure.
speak the language of music,
Mm.
but it's not how I express I mean, playing music as an instrumentalist is not how I express myself.
Yeah, of course.
But I love working with musicians, working with composers. One of my favorite things when I started making films was doing like working with a composer on the score. Yeah, it's just so brilliant because it's just the pure emotional landscape of the film,
Mm.
and just kind of focus on that solely for a while was just really felt really indulgent, and also it just like moves the story, the it really kind of advances what the audience experience is.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think, when you hear music, you hear because a lot of people talk about Becky and Pinter being poets, and there's the meat and like, no, sort of like Shakespeare in a way, is that you hear the beats in the line, you hear the rhythm of it, and that's when it all starts to make sense.
Like Debbie Tucker Green, I love her writing because she does that so beautifully,
Mm.
yeah, there's loads of contemporary writers who, I mean, I suppose it's Susie Miller,
Of
there's
course,
like
yeah.
there's a rhythm that feels authentic to those writers. Yeah.
Yeah. You mentioned Susie Miller there. We arrive very quickly today at Prima Facie. God, this could be the Prima Facie podcast. I mean, well, it's great. I love it. So tell me about how you first heard about the project.
So Justin Martin was the director of that. I had worked with Justin on a play called The Inheritance, and he called me up and told me about this play and asked, did I want to work on it? I said, yes, of course. Yes, please.
Yes.
And mainly just because I really trust him as a director, but also when the first time I read the script, I was really moved by it. It had this kind of surprising power. Like it's deceptive. You think it's um like you think you understand how it works, like it makes sense, and she's telling the story, and it's very kind of simple on the surface, and that it's just one character talking, and but the emotional kind of wave of it is irresistible, and it comes crashing over you. So yeah, there was Justin, there was the script, and then we did a bit of workshopping on it to figure out how to stage it, and then we did a read through with Jodie when she was cast by that point, and then rehearsals
Yeah.
and production, and then it went to
Production.
Broadway. Yeah, no, then it sort of became this sort of entity that it has become known to be, which is yeah, very important and impactful production. Yeah, that reached a lot of people.
Yeah. Yeah, brilliantly so. I don't think I've asked about because a lot of these plays they have, as you say, like the workshops beforehand. I think I mentioned the Layman trilogy in the bio. I remember Sam Mendes talking about how they workshopped it with a group of like 20 to 30 people before they narrowed it down to three people. Um, can you tell me about like, well, first of all, like what is like the workshop before you go into rehearsals, and what was it specifically like on Prima Facie?
Yeah, so workshopping I'm very familiar with because this you mentioned the National Theatre Studio where I was the resident director.
Mm,
That's basically like an engine room of workshops for new work or so I've kind of experienced workshops at all stages where one it could be the beginning of a devised process where there isn't even a script, or it could be that the play has been tried and tested and is being workshopped to figure out what's the music going to do or how do we do the gymnastic aerial flying in Peter Pan or whatever, and there's a workshop for a very specific thing. And if I could just spend my life in workshops, I think I would, because it's a room full of actors and creative brains and all things are possible at that stage. You're
mm,
not too worried about things like budget and timelines and schedules. For Prima Facie, it was about going, how does this one woman on stage do everything and how to create what are the foundational pieces that we need in terms of set to make the whole show. So it was playing around with tables and video and projector and chairs and a wheelie bag and stuff and also bringing some other actors in and seeing if there's other if there was sort of like a language of having other people on stage, which we obviously ruled out and decided to just have the main character on stage doing everything because it's sort of her playground. And probably you spoke to Justin about this, so once again, I'll refer people to the other episode.
mm.
um, but yeah, it's really useful when there is, and this is, I think producers are generally aware of this, and those that facilitate workshops happening obviously know how valuable they can be because it can be the difference of a huge design change of direction. It could be a big casting discovery that you make. It could be massive script changes. So I just think having the chance to test drive um, a show before you're in rehearsals for it is invaluable.
Mm. Was there ever a conversation for it to be more than one person, prima facie?
No, not more than one person in the play, but there was a like an idea about would there be kind of not like stage managers, but people who she could kind of control. So the idea of her being the master of this playground of the legal sphere and the first half of the play.
Mm.
And in the end, how it manifested was she could move everything around the stage. But is there a version of that? Was the at one point where there would be people who she could tell to do those things or command in some way to do those things.
Yeah,
Um, but we thought the more interesting option was that she's doing it.
yeah. And
And that
then,
then stuff happens to her in the second half. So it's about that, the line that theatrical language of she seems to be the one in control of the playground, and then the stage starts to get out of her control, and she's kind of stranded in this terrible void in the second half.
yeah, yeah. And there's you mentioned the word play, you used the word playground there, and it literally was like this huge playground, and in amongst the, if anyone who has seen it or hasn't seen it, sorry, the play is about Tessa Ensler, who's a young lawyer. She fights for justice in sexual assault cases. So we might mention topics relating to that, guys. So if just a little trigger warning for anyone who is it might be affected by this, just letting you know now. So she fights for the justice system, and which she firmly believes in will give everyone justice until something really horrible happens to her. And then she has to find a way to use the system and everything she's learned to try and bring justice forward, not only for her, but for many other women who have been through said things, and that's all I'll say. I might have spoiled it on other episodes, but if you're just discovering it now, then go and read the book. It's now a book now. It's now a novel. Susie just released it. Read both the book and the play. It's just a wonderful, wonderful piece of work. But anyway, so you use the word playground there, and part of the show, Jodie or Danny, if she was stepping in, was just in this complete, as you say, this complete playground of tables, chairs, there's candles. How did that idea come about in the rehearsal room?
Good question. Okay, I'm just casting my mind back. So the tables became pivotal because they're sort of a stage on a stage.
Mm.
So it gives you scale for a one woman show. So you can have her isolated on a sort of island, and they were these big tables that actually came from a barrister. So they're like wooden, they kind of feel like establishment, like a lot of these places, the court, the whole tradition of the law and the court system in this country is very patriarchal and old and establishmenty. So it was a way of bringing that on stage without the whole set being wooden panels, because the set was made of all these white folders, which lawyers used for their briefs, for the cases or files are within those. And then it becomes like you realize that there was a sort of language of the white folders, and then at the end of the play you realize all those folders represented a case of sexual assault, and one of the folders was Tessa as the main character. So yeah, so it was just a kind of a journey of finding, creating a playground, bringing the kind of world of patriarchy on stage and that legal world, not having it too literal because she had to move between multiple locations and time lines. It doesn't all go chronologically. What else? One of the really strong emotional instincts and visual instincts that Miriam Buther, the designer, and Justin agreed on early was this element of rain, that it would rain on her. So after she has been victim of sexual assault, it starts raining, and it's a really, really profound bit of staging.
Yeah, it really was. It really was.
And the soundtrack and everything just kind of really coalesced and kind of landed in this huge, because it was in a West End theatre. Like there's a version of the show in it that's a much smaller scale kind of chamber piece, and you can do it that way. But when it's going to be in a big theatre, you kind of need to scale up the theatricality and have the emotional impact on everyone. And The Rain really did that, I think, beautifully.
Yeah, I remember Justin told me a story that when he had the idea for rain to fall on Jodie, he called her up, and I think she was on a holiday, and she went, Jodie, just so you know, rain's gonna fall, and I'm gonna wet you on stage." And there's this pause on the end of the line, and it was just like, okay. Yeah.
She's brilliant. She's up for everything.
Yeah. Oh no, she was fantastic, fantastic. Big shout out to Jodie Comer. Amazing, amazing performance. Yeah, and it was you mentioned the set designer there, Miriam Buther. Did I say that right?
I think so. I hope that's how I said
Well,
it.
I'll say I'm going off you, mate. But yeah, she did this amazing thing. How often because sorry, just for anyone who's not aware, that's on the first day, the director shows this little box, which is of a design of what the set's going to look like. So it's scaled all the way down to a little cardboard box, and then obviously when it goes into the theater, it goes like it's much much bigger. So how were you involved in those conversations of the folders and the set design and everything with Justin and Miriam?
Yeah, and we went around to some like barristers' chambers and to the Inns of Court and to the Old Bailey and various other courtrooms around London. And it was on those research trips that Miriam spotted the white folders and was like, hmm. And then actually in this office where you can see me now, I'm at home. This room was literally full of white folders because we were like sourcing them from all these different places. And there was a brilliant barrister, Danielle Manson, who sourced like most of the folders of the set and the tables and everything. She helped us out a lot with research and insight into the whole inner workings of being a barrister. And yeah, literally finding stuff. So yeah, it was very, it's funny because you think of these things as being like this big machine and things where, but it's all about like tweeting. Where can we get folders? It's also sustainable because a lot of these places they like dumping the folders.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's good.
Yeah, I mean, it was a beautiful set. Just everything, not only just like the scale of everything, but I think this is probably discussed in the rehearsal room as well, like the metaphorical images and a bit of a spoiler towards the end. One folder is put back and is lit up, and then another one lights up, and another one lights up, another one lights up, and it's just this huge beam of light, and then the lights go down, and then that's it. Um, it's a metaphorical image of how just the law, so many aspects of it need to change. And just a little note, actually, since then I've heard that criminal lawyers or people who are I'm not sure what the actual terminology is, but people within the law who are involved with these certain cases have to watch the NT live recording of Prima Facie before they do anything else, or that part of it, yeah, isn't it?
Is there's a few things, and I don't want to misspeak,
Yeah, of
so
course, of course.
maybe we can put it in notes at the end. But
Yeah.
I think that when judges are preparing, that they watch um it as part of their training, and also some of the wording
Hmm.
from the play is included in the directions to the jury.
Hmm.
So it's a reminder that a witness who's like the the chief witness. You're basically, if you're the victim of sexual assault, you're the chief witness in the Crown's case against the person. It's not you personally taking the case, and it's a reminder to the jury that the victim or the alleged victim or the complainant, all these different terms,
Hmm.
might not remember things or explain things in a neatly packaged set of linear evidence. That trauma can cause you to be confused or not necessarily be able to package it up
Hmm.
in a beautiful narrative. So, and clearly I'm not the writer, but Susie expresses that really, really clearly and beautifully in the final speech of the play.
Hmm.
And yeah, so I think they're inspired by her work, definitely. And she was a barrister, a criminal barrister, and um yeah,
Yeah,
a full face of people's experiences.
yeah. She knows how it works. Yeah. Um, who is Tessa to you? How would you sum her up?
Character.
Yeah.
Um, well, at the beginning, she's uh, a bit of a show off, and I mean that in the most affectionate way, because she's taking us along for a ride. Like, look what I can do in amongst all of these thoroughbred lawyers who've had all these advantages and are all, kind of posh wankers, but look how brilliantly I can turn a case in my favor, and I can lead a witness to do exactly what I need them to do and say to win the case. And you see that she has forged a path in a different direction to some of her family. So she goes back and visits her family at home, and there's tension around that. And she's a bit of a party girl. She has a good time. So that's the test that we meet at the beginning, and she's really, she's really charming and witty and funny and entertaining. But more than anything, she is an avid um, follower, or you could even of the her religion is the law. That's how
Yeah.
just kind of put it, I think. Um, and then, of course, so she gets attacked by someone when she's on a date with them, and he's another barrister, and he represents kind of all of the people who have, like, his dad is a,
Yeah.
success, and his total establishment, and You
Yeah.
see the class and gender working against her when she tries to use the law to protect herself in the second half. And I suppose that's a huge learning curve for her because she holds on to her faith in the law, but then in the end, she kind of finds her new voice and realizing that it's not working the way it should. And she finds a way of expressing that is totally authentic to her. So yeah.
Yeah. Great stuff. There's this huge journey which she goes on, and I've been curious to know, like, you being in the rehearsal room for that whole time period. Was it 3 weeks or 4 weeks rehearsal that you had?
Oh, how many weeks? It was more than three.
Yeah.
I think it was 4 weeks. Plus, then of course you're in tech for a few days and previews. You continue to rehearse.
Mm.
Yeah, it was a lot to do, and like I think we ran the first half at the end of on the first Friday. Like this is,
Wow.
it was really jumping in at deep end. And of course, Jodie had had the material for a long time, and she was like coming off book, and had been
Yeah.
learning. But it's one thing to get off book, and it's another thing to then
Yeah.
build the show. And as an actor, as soon as you think you're off book, and then you're like things change in the staging, and you're like, how come I can't connect those thoughts anymore? And you have to rebuild it all.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, the reason I ask is because, I mean, the journey that obviously she goes on in the play, but the journey that, you guys as a creative group probably went through from day one to like the first preview, and then it was opening night, and then it was sort of like the middle of the run, and then it was the end, and then of course you went to Broadway as well. So what would you say was like the journey of the creative team behind it, and like your journey with this text?
I mean, we all had great faith in the text, but I think nobody was really prepared for the reaction of the first performance, which was,
Huge,
I mean,
huge.
unforgettable.
Yeah,
I think, audience and create, team, the crew, and everyone alike, like we really didn't understand what was going to happen when you bring these people into the theater and experience the play. And
mm,
so the brilliant thing about an actress like Jodie Comer is she will bring, like, there were just people coming who it's kind of what didn't really know what to. I mean, how would you know what to expect from a play like that?
yeah,
What, and for the first half, you're just having a really good time with her. And then I think how it just touched and opened up people's hearts, and a lot of people found it so cathartic to see that character's experience, and that they were able to articulate for the first time what had happened, stuff that had happened to them,
mm,
and kind of it validated or uh, their experiences. So while we knew that the play had power and depth, I don't know if anyone was really prepared for, like, it was electric. Like people, but
mm,
before the, like, you described that moment where all the folders are lighting up, and there's this beautiful music from Rebecca Lucy Taylor, and
mm,
it's there, and the speech is finished, and she's like, kind of her character is just having her final moments, and it's very much present with the audience, and you could just feel this like bubbling energy. And as it got to the last note of and the lighting up of the folders, people just erupted up off, like jumped out of their seats and started clapping. And it was very vocal. And it wasn't even like at the end of the play. We were like, this wait till the lights come down. Yeah, and like it was also very, very uh close and intimate, and special bonds that everyone had, like backstage. And
yeah,
it's a small show. Like there's just one person in every role, one assistant stage manager, one lighting designer, one, so we all got to know each other quite well. And um, Justin creates a room that's very inclusive and open and safe. And Yeah, and we did a lovely company manager, Georgia Bird, who really uh, put in place, some good measures for everybody's mental health. And coming out of character at the end of the show. They built a ritual for Jodie around coming back on stage and having music and kind of leaving the character and her experiences on stage so that she could go home as herself without that baggage.
Oh yeah, of course.
So I think, all of that, the culture of the company and building the right team, getting a team in the room who were really, really up for supporting each other. That was great.
Yeah. No, you guys created something really, 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 really special, I think, because as you said earlier, it's a feminist piece, and it speaks directly to women, and there's a thing that runs through it, like one verbal motif, if you will, is that look to your left, look to your right, it's one of us, so or the one in three, as Susie writes in the book. And she told this story where she's had so many people come up to her. She said in a recent podcast recording, that people come up to her and say they don't really say anything else other than I'm one in three, and then they thank her for the amazing awareness that she's created as well. I also just want to highlight quickly, having just finished the book recently, and I think this is alluded to in the play as well. Of course, it is that when this horrific event happens to Tessa, and then she knows that she wants to take this to court, but everyone around her is going, "You can't take this to court. You will lose. You will put your career, your reputation completely on the line." But the real courage that she gets to say, "Look, no, I'm going to fight for this. This is not right. This is not only is it illegal, but it's inhumane as well. What this Julian guy has done." And just the strength of that character to do that, and now what Susie's done also to create all this awareness and all that. It must have. I mean, were those sort of the conversations that you were having? Just the strength of this character of Tessa.
I mean, I want to say yes, but also when you're working on a show, like building the show was the thing. Like that, I think in a way that's the power of the script, and we could, like we all started obviously love Tessa, but really a lot of the conversation around how do we make this scene work and how do we
Yeah, of
make
course, of course.
land and so it's a lot. You're just um a lot of the time I spent in the nuts and bolts of
Yeah, of
making,
course.
and then you can feel it and have those conversations with people who come and see the show. I think it's
Yeah,
sort of, yeah.
yeah. But so what are the sort of the nuts and bolts of like how do you make so
Well,
say if you get a scene and you're thinking, I'm not sure how we're going to do this. How do you sort of tackle the more difficult parts of rehearsal and make a scene work?
um, that's kind of the essential question. I think it's okay. Well, it's about finding the right idea, the right theatrical idea to make the scene as clear as possible, or the dynamics of the scene, or the underlying um, action of the scene. So let me try and think of an example.
Hmm.
So I mean, even just the language of her moving the tables around, we talk about that's the sort of overarching language or overarching idea of it being a playground, and then her losing control of that. Or in a scene where she's showing us an example of her cross-examining a victim, a witness, an alleged victim. She puts the chair up on the table, and later on, she's going to be in that chair. So it's sort of about creating that language of. She doesn't know it yet, but she's going to. Anyway, you recognize it when it comes back,
Yeah.
uh, and or finding a physicality to like when it came to staging the rape scene, that was very much about finding language that was both truthful but also not graphic and literal.
Yeah.
So and it had to feel right for her as a performer, but it also had to be clear what was happening in every story beat. So it's just, sometimes you have to kind of slow down and go moment by moment, and um you know you can't get lost in the emotion of it, and it has to be repeatable. It has to be clear to the audience what's happening in every moment, and it has to be something and that's a lot of what I work on with when in the role of associate, is like afterwards, after the show is open and everything's been decided and it's all like how do you repeat that with the same level of spontaneity and truthfulness and emotional depth? So sometimes an actor will just need a little bit of a refresher or a shift in the thought process to keep that same level of yeah, discovery in the
Mm.
moment.
Yeah.
I hope I've answered the question.
No, absolutely, absolutely. Writers talk about writer's block and stuff. This is a question I've had to other directors who've been on the show. Is there such a thing as director's block? Is that a thing?
Yeah, I mean, you can always get stuck or an idea that you thought would work really well, and then when you try it, you're like, oh, it's not actually as clear as I thought. So it's just about being really, um, I think, not trying to flog a dead horse. If it's clear the idea is not working, don't like beat it into a pulp to try and force your original idea through. Just try something else.
Yeah.
And that's why it's good to have a team of collaborators, be it an associate director or a designer or a, stage management team or whatever, who you trust and who you can go, what's not working and what's the right idea.
Mm.
But it's also the advantage of doing workshops because you can test drive ideas and see what's gonna hold.
Yeah.
So sorry, there's a fly.
That's fine.
My head. It's like
Yeah, it's buzzing around behind you, innit?
I just wanted to go out.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Oh, right, he'll leave. He'll leave.
I'm trying not to get distracted by it.
No, it's good. So, yeah, what would you say was a good way of, because, again, writer's block, some people say they leave the writing for a couple of hours and then, or go for a walk or something and come back to it later. If you're in the director's room, of course, you guys only had like 4 weeks or so to rehearse and there are schedules and stuff to be met. If you are struggling through something, and obviously the right thing to do is not panic and be like, oh, we can't find anything, it's all gone to shit. Obviously, you don't do that. But, what's the best way of sort of approaching it so to get through that block, if you will?
I mean, it depends on your personality.
Yeah, of
you
course.
know,
Yeah, of course.
go and have a cigarette.
Yeah.
Hashtag.
Yes, take five. Take five.
Yeah, having a break is always good, getting perspective, and sometimes leaving it and coming back to it the next day, and then having your walk or having your shower moment where you have the idea breaks through.
Yeah.
Sometimes opening it up for discussion can be helpful, depending, and just having experience and going, am I diagnosing this correctly? Is it a directing thing or is it a design thing or are me and the actor understanding the scene differently? Is it a writing thing? Is it actually, does the thing need to be rewritten?
Mm.
So having the kind of confidence to make whatever change you need to make, because if you're like, oh, but the design has already decided that we're doing this, that, and the other, or I can't change the script, or maybe you can,
Mm.
and maybe it's just about pace, or it could be about the
Yeah.
tone that you think this is a romantic scene, and somehow it's just not working, and then you go, oh no, it's actually a scene about trying to find my keys, or they're actually trying to break up, but whatever. Anyway, just finding the right kind of dynamic that brings it alive.
Yeah. Oh, fantastic. I just got one final question about Prima Facie before you move on to your film work. Georgia Bird, who's also been on the show, or G Bird, I think she calls herself, the company stage manager, talked about how, and of course Danny talked about this as well. Danny Arlington, Jodie's understudy, talked a lot about how and again you mentioned it just there about the impact that this show had. It's gone around the world. It's now being used in courtrooms and all kinds of things. But do you remember, like specifically, like those first few weeks? Danny talked about how so many people came to the stage door, and so many people sent letters to the theatre about their stories about what was going on and stuff. But what was your experience? I mean, because both Georgia and Danny talked about just how many people came forward, but just how so many people were confident enough to share what happened to them as a result of seeing this play. What was your experience with some of these stories that got?
Um, I was, party to that, but also I had the advantage of being able to just sit in the audience and watch the show as many times as
Mm.
I, well, I was watching it regularly to do notes and work with Jodie and do work with Danny as well. But being in the audience, you can really feel the emotional ride that the audience are having. So that, that for me is really precious, to be there live with them and hear it and hear them talk to each other and whisper things, or see someone's head nodding in agreement as she's making her points, or the gasps of a realization when when things happen and the night turns sour. And so for me, it's like I always kind of pick up on what the audience is experiencing in the moment. And then you hear those conversations afterwards. But of course, for Jodie and for the whole backstage team, they can feel that, I'm sure, and I know that Jodie on stage could hear a lot of responses, but then the actual interaction that they get is after the show. So it's kind of slightly different.
Yeah. What would you say was the best? Sorry, just one more. What was the what would you say was the best reaction, or the most like memorable reaction that you saw on the audience?
Memorable was that first performance, because we didn't know what to expect beyond that. And also it was sort of, I think with first preview, you always get an audience who are really up for it, really keen. They're either fans of the performance or fans of the writer or the material or something. So you get a really willing audience. And also it's so kind of by the seat of your pants for the creative team, who are like, oh, we haven't really finished checking that bit, or and for the performer, it's bloody nerve-wracking, of course.
Yeah.
And sort of helter-skelter, let's just go. So I think the combination of all those elements makes it really unforgettable. And like, I literally remember the look of the person's head who was sitting in front of me on that night, because I could see her head. I could see the emotion from the back of her head. Like, it was incredible. And so I could see her every beat understanding or what she was feeling. And I have a really strong picture of this girl's hair and feeling all this emotion from her. Yeah, it was fun.
Yeah. Fantastic. And just thank you for that show. I mean, it's not only from a theatrical perspective, as a keen theatre goer and actor myself, I just loved seeing things like that. And it was one of those events that came along when when something's really, really special. And the second I saw, I mean, not because of Jodie or anything, because I'm a big fan of hers and everything. There was something about. Remember the first time I saw the design by Doug Kerr, who did the two images of Jodie, was absolutely stunning. And my first reaction was, this is going to be big. This is going to be something really, really, really special. And you were part of making it all special. So thank you, Jane, for Prima Facie.
Thank you, Oliver. It's a pleasure to talk about it, because of how special it was. Yeah.
Yeah. And just thank you for that. It was an amazing, amazing experience for, I'm sure, yourselves, but for everyone who came to see it. So thank you for that. It was great. So we move on to your film work, which I've been lucky to see your debut short film, Kitchen Tales, and I Called You, which was doing the festival runs at the moment, like I said in the beginning. I've seen them both. They're both absolutely wonderful, and I enjoyed both of them very much. So congratulations on both of those, Jane. So we'll start with Kitchen Tales, which is a really, really beautiful story about an Indian couple coming to the UK and finding their love for each other, as well as their way through British culture in a way. And the motif that keeps coming back to is cooking, is food, hence the name Kitchen Tales, and everything that happens. I won't say any more than that, but because it's doing the rounds at the moment, you can go watch it, guys. At the moment, website down below. How did that film come about, Kitchen Tales?
Thanks. Yeah, I'm really proud of it, actually.
No, you should be, of course. It's a beautiful piece.
It captures so many things that I'm really fond of. So how it came about was, I was working at the National Theatre, and there was a writer in residence called Anupama Chandrasekhar, and she is an Indian writer, and she was writing The Father and the Assassin. And she and I just get on so well. We became friends. She shared this screenplay of a short film with me at one point, because we started talking about films. And I was like, wow, what a beautiful piece of writing. And it went in a drawer. And then a while later, maybe 2 years later or something,
Mm.
I still remembered it. It had got under my skin. But this was, she had written it set in India with an Indian couple. It wasn't a story of migration at all. And I said to her, look, there's something really special about what you've written, and I'd love to have a go making this with you. But we bring them over to the UK. And also, it kind of just gave me a way in. Not that, I'm not claiming to share the experience of South Asian immigrants here. Obviously, I'm from Ireland. Um, but there were some elements of it and other aspects, the romance of the story and the kind of relationship between the couple and the role of food as a language and all of that were real personal connections to me. And then paired up with an actress friend of mine, Sheena Batessa, who is the actress in the film. And I knew that she would be a really brilliant producer. She hadn't produced any film before, but we'd been talking about things that we wanted to do with her as a producer in theatre. And so that's kind of how it came about. And then we just like none of us had made film before. So and then the lockdown, then the pandemic happened.
Yeah, yeah.
That weirdly was actually very fortuitous in the in Kitchen Tales being able to be made, because it gave me time to sort of go and figure out how do you how do you make a film. I just like watched loads of stuff, talked to loads of people. Zoom was happening now. Zoom was a thing.
Mm.
Read books. I sort of did a lot of homework on how does one make a film. And Sheena had some friends in the States who were producers who gave us a lot of support. And then we had another producer here, an Australian producer called Charlotte Howley. And we did a big crowdfunding campaign, and we met with lots of HODs, cinematographers and sound people, and costume and hair and makeup, and we got Nikesh Patel, the beautiful actor Nikesh, on board as well very early. And so the script developed a lot with Sheena and Nikesh. We spoke a lot about their heritage and their families and their family recipes. And I went to Sheena's mum's house and camera tested a lot of the food, because I wanted to know which of the recipes should make it onto the screen that would be interesting to look at, and all of those kind of things. So that was one of my favorite bits of research, was camera testing the food.
I bet it was.
Yeah. I was asking her, because in the film the woman she's not a very good cook at the beginning, which people were like, could that be possible for a young Indian woman? But we were like, yeah, for all of these reasons, this is why she struggles in the kitchen.
Yeah.
So I was asking Sheena's mum, well, how might she mess this up, with this dish? How would she mess it up? And her mum was like, no, she couldn't mess it up. It's so simple. It's so simple. I was like, no. So in the end, she just burns stuff a lot.
Yeah. And it's fantastic. I can imagine that you going along to these. She's making all this lovely food, and and you're going. It's for the work. It's for the work. Just give me a bit more.
Yeah. But it was really helpful, because there were some things that she made without us requesting, and they ended up making it into film instead of all the things that had been written in the script, because it was like, oh, that is a much simpler recipe, but look at how it bubbles, or look at how the steam rises up on the hob.
Yeah. There was some really beautiful shots of the food actually being made, like you said, the bubbles and the steam and everything. And not to sound like too kind of film geeky or anything, but watching the way that you captured it and the way it was filmed and color graded and all that stuff, it was almost like it really played on the imagination, because I could feel myself almost smelling those foods. Or
Good.
yeah, I was thinking that I could sort of see everything that's gone into that. And I'm thinking I could sort of imagine that dish had a spicy scent, that one had more like a herbally sort of scent and everything. And the way that you shot it was absolutely beautiful. And so there's one scene, if I may talk about an event that happens later on in the film. It doesn't give anything away, but kind of just one little bit.
I mean, with a short film, I think it's fine to give spoilers.
But it's your film. I don't want to ruin anything. But there's a moment where I think there are tensions between the married couple, and she is in the middle of making this beautiful Indian dish, all the spices and everything, and then she's not burning stuff anymore. She's got the hang of it now. And then it cuts to the scene where the husband's just heating up a microwavable mac and cheese. And and the contrast between those two, I thought that's a brilliant symbol using food about where the two of them were in their relationship at that time. How did that come about?
So the concept from the original script was that they wouldn't even talk, that there was no dialogue in the script, and
Okay.
basically kind of create a challenge for us was to make food the language of communication between them.
Mm.
Yeah, so that was and I just knew that the sounds of the food, like it's quite funny when it does that cut from the microwave back to her, and it's like we really push the sound of the, you know, the like fork stabbing the foil for the microwave. I don't know, I find that funny.
Yeah. Is you had the boom mic operator get really, really close to that. Just like, come on, just really get these pricking sounds.
Well, actually, we had the most genius sound editor team, Chad Aurora and Felipe Herrera. I'm not
Mm.
actually sure Portuguese name. But Chad and Felipe, uh, they did a lot of Foley, so a lot of the sounds that were recreated again afterwards. They got all of the pots and pans that were used in the film, and they asked for the recipes, and they like actually did, to get all the sounds again. So it was obviously captured on set as well, but some of them, like they really were super rigorous about the post production sound, and
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I just fell in love with post production from because it's not something that there isn't an equivalent really in theatre, and
No, no. Yeah.
just the level of detail and the level of control that you can get in post production is unbelievable, and that's what's so seductive to me as a director. It's like
mm,
editing and the music and the sound and the color grade, like you mentioned, that you really do get to hold and manipulate the micro, really really tiny details that make it. And it's so intimate collaborating with all those people, kind
mm.
of one on one after you've done the big production of filming it, and then you get to like slow down and go super super micro detail. And of
Yeah.
course in the edit, you're also zooming out, like thinking of the bigger picture, and is the flow of this all right, and I learned a lot from doing that one, and then um I'm developing other stuff for screen as well,
Yeah.
because I really fell in love with it.
Yeah. Just we'll come back to kitchen towels just one second. I want to get this question in. Um, you mentioned there about the scope and everything, and of course, I'm gonna have to mention it again. But Prima Facie was filmed for NT Live as well as part of that. And how much of that being a filmmaker yourself, did you have a say on the shots that were used? The angles that you wanted to film, was that part of it as well?
Yeah, so for filming NT Live, they have a team, and it's multi-camera. So there's like I think it was six cameras,
Yeah.
and then the camera director. So he'll come in and he'll watch the show multiple times, and he'll watch like a very basic recording of the show as well, so that he's very familiar with it. And he did like a first draft of it should be this camera and this shot at this time, and then that, and then it switches to that camera and da da da. And then Justin and I had opinions about that as well. And then we did like a rehearsal version of the NT Live, and then watched that, and then gave notes based on that. So we actually changed the camera setup because it needed more of one. I can't remember the details now, to be honest, but it needed another moving camera, for example, because they were too static, or one of them wasn't being used that much because it was so much from below, so we needed it up higher or something. I can't remember the details exactly,
Yeah,
but
sure.
yeah. And then there were certain shots, it's helpful, I think, sometimes, like it's a story of a woman on stage, so it was helpful for them to be able to check with me about gaze, so there were some shots where I was like, I think that's a bit objectifying. So maybe we could substitute that one with something else, or you're trying to find the rhythm of the scene. So yeah, I fed in like my thoughts and suggestions and notes on that process as well.
Yeah.
Kind of, I mean, it's a very particular thing trying to capture live performance on a multicam. It's very different from telling a story on film.
Yeah.
You're trying to capture yeah, the liveness of it and create an experience for cinema or home screen audience that will kind of replicate being in the theatre, which you never can do exactly, but you can kind of give them the impression. And certainly when people see it in the cinema, it feels much more like a live event.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you really captured that. But just the scope of everything as well. So just going back to Kitchen Tales, as like before. So when you were filming it, you have an idea because the whole cinema or the big screen is going to have this one shot of literally just food bubbling away in a pan or something, and that visual image that you created was beautiful and all that. And I suppose like this is a bit of kind of a silly question really, but when you're filming it, obviously the angles and the shots that everything that you have. So do you sort of go into it thinking I definitely want a shot of the food to be the main shot on the screen at one point, or does it change a lot when you're actually in the room with the equipment and people?
Well, yeah, we had a pretty like we planned out a shot list in advance and had a lot of visual references, and also because of the speed that you have to work, the whole team, the production designer and costume designer and everyone makeup need to know what's going to be shot so that they know which bit of the room they're dressing in which bit of the room the equipment can light and all of that, you're moving lights around a lot.
Mm.
A lot of moving the lights. Well, we're just lighting this bit of the scene.
Yeah,
Now
like,
we're
it's like
lighting the
hang
other.
on. It's like hang on, a little bit
And
more,
the
a little bit more, a
schedule
little
is
bit more.
built according to the shot list.
Yeah.
So um uh we definitely cut some stuff on the fly that we didn't have time to do. So you have to kind of prioritize which shots are the ones that are going to help you tell the story the most. And also, um, the DOP Oscar Partridge, he is very intuitive with performance. So there were things where it maybe was two shots on the shot list, but actually he was able to move between the performer and so there's never, I don't think there's ever a shot where you don't at least see the character's hands. So there's always a presence of the character there. And then like a lot of the food, it's cut very quickly. So you're never away from the characters for very long. But yeah, it was quite planned out.
Mm.
Uh, yeah, there was more that ended up getting cut. It
Yeah.
was very like, there was a lot of subtle details in the script, and I'd love to have captured even more, but also, yeah, then you kind of run out of time.
You run out of time.
Yeah, and like the kid, so they have a kid who grows up, and the baby, so it appears as a baby, as like a toddler, as a 9-year-old kid, and then as a teenager who becomes an adult. And the 9-year-old kid was just such a gorgeous little performer, and I regret that we didn't get a close up, but we ran out of because it's even more strict hours when you're shooting a child performer.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And I was like, "Oh, can you not stay for half an hour more?" And they were like, "Nope,
Yep. No, my
nope,
chauffeur.
we've used
My,
up the."
yeah, my chauffeur's here. I've got to go.
I know, I'm sure, like his parents, I'm sure they would have, but you can't. It's there's licensing. I don't know. Anyway, look,
Yeah,
it's
yeah, yeah.
all
Just,
for there for good reason, so the kids don't.
yeah. It's a tricky maze, isn't it?
Yeah.
I've got a question for you about the editing process because I've done my own short film when I was at drama school, and I found the editing process to be quite tedious because not primarily because I'd never used editing equipment before, and trying to layer everything up, and then sometimes things would come through saying, "Oh, the this file is not supported," so you're supposed to cut to another scene, and there's just a big blurry sign saying, it's not allowed in or something like that. But how did you approach the edit on this one, and what advice would you give to people who find editing a bit tedious?
Work with an editor. Like I didn't do
Oh,
anything.
there you go. There you go. Easy.
Yeah. That's how we. And I think you and I have had a brief exchange about filmmaking aside from this podcast, but
Yeah.
I think working with people who are experts in what they do is the hack to being a good director. Basically,
Yeah.
work with people who are just brilliant at their thing. So
Mm. People
on
who love editing. Yeah.
Luca was our editor, Luca Petra, and she taught me loads about like she was really, really. like people in film are just gorgeous. At least the people I've worked with in film are just so lovely and collaborative. And we're so excited that this was my first film, but that I was coming to it with a lot of directing experience from theatre. So there was, yeah, they were just really generous and patient with me in terms of the things that were different. Um, and yes, I'm really grateful. But yeah, she was just brilliant. And like, I can't get over the whizness. It's like playing multiple instruments at the same time, all the shortcuts, and they're going, and you're seeing stuff moving and on the screen, and it's like this. Yeah, and I think it's just about having a really powerful computer as well. I think they have super powerful computers that can process so much, so many gigabytes of film footage all at once. Um, yeah. So
Yeah.
that would be my advice. Don't do it yourself.
Don't do it yourself. I
But
wish.
then there are amazing filmmakers who do a lot of that themselves. Like who like I think Chloe Zhao, who was the Oscar-winning director of Nomadland, and what was the other film that she made before that? I can't remember what it's called, but it's about a guy who trains horses.
Oh God.
Anyway, but I think she edits her own films.
I have no idea. I need to look that up. But yeah, no, because how do you like to work with your editor? Because you must have, correct me if I'm wrong, but did you have like for every shot that's in the final cut, the final edit, was there like three or four other choices that you had, and was it a
Oh
process of
yeah.
narrowing it down?
Oh yeah. I'm very, very detailed in the editors. They'll have a first cut, they'll do an assembly cut, which is like a shot for every beat of the story that you filmed,
Mm.
basically. So it'll be this makes sense version of the film, and apparently it always makes you want to tear your hair out. I was just quite very excited because it was my first experience, but also I was like, oh, we have a lot of work to do. And we did cut one or two more scenes in the edit process as well. And then one scene that we cut made it back in, and different things. But you can get super nuanced, and like a really good editor is also has an ability to capture the performance in a way. So you might use different takes across the scene because
Mm.
the way they did it in that take and that moment and the rhythm of it. And one point you're like, oh, that blink is maybe a bit off-putting. Should we the blink from another take? Like literally you can get so microscopic. But then it's also about the whole rhythm of it and the emotional flow. And I don't know, it's so lovely to just sit in a dark room and play with what we shot. Like it's
Yeah,
great.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And what's
It
that?
passes so quickly.
Yeah. No, what's the feeling like when you saw it start to finish, when you saw the version that's out there now? What was it like watching that for the first time and thinking, all right,
Well, you've watched it so many times and in so many different ways, and then even after you've done picture lock, so even when the editor is finished, like cutting it together in the right order, then you're doing the music and the sound and the color grade. So you keep watching the same film like so many times, and each time you're looking at it for a different reason. So really, the first time watching it is when an audience watches it, and we had to do our like preview screening online. So I was like watching all these people on their little
those
camera,
Zoom
trying,
boxes? Yeah.
yeah, yeah, seeing, when people like hold hands with each other and stuff. But the first time we got it in a festival in London, it was screened at the Barbican, and that was amazing because it was like
Mm.
real people. When you just, it's that's like I'm used to the theater and having a live audience, so that was really special for it finally to. It was because of the pandemic, Anyway, it was lockdown
Yeah.
after.
Yeah, we just come out of that bit now. Is that weird phase, wasn't it? Yeah. But I spoke to a couple of filmmakers on here, Tom Berkeley, Ross Wright, who won the fellow Irishman, like yourself. They won the Oscar for Best Short Film, An Irish Goodbye, which I thought was just a
Brilliant short film. I loved it.
so good. And yeah, hi guys, if you're watching, sorry if you're listening or whatever. Um, it was a beautiful, beautiful film. And one question I asked them on the show that we did was, which I'd like to ask you is, like, how do you know when a film's done? Is it literally a case of, but there's simply nothing more we can do with this thing, or is it something else?
I think I mean, I think they're probably a bit more experienced than I am with it. So I would yeah, go listen to that episode. Basically, I'm just trying to get your listeners to listen to all episodes of your podcast. Um,
Oh, thank you. I like that. It's good.
it's a bit like when you get to press night in theatre, except that has a really clear deadline. I think that the factors can be how much there's on the one side there's resources, which is time and money, and how much time you can afford to pay people to work on it.
Yeah, of course.
Thing that's always like costly and time pressure for me has been the color grade. And I'm like, oh my God, but like, can we just spend a bit more time? And they're like, this is how much you booked. Whereas in other areas, it's been a bit more like elastic, and we've got to where we're really happy with it and gone, yeah, no, I think that's it. That's the version of it, and that's where you want. I mean, that's where you want to be. You want to be happy.
Mm.
Um, I remember hearing, I think it was like a Woody Allen quote or something. I mean, this is probably like has been, passed off as various people's quotes, but somebody saying of their film, like, oh, wow, your film was really great. And he goes, oh, you think that's great? You should have seen what it was like in my head. That really like resonated with me.
That's good. I like that. That's good. That's a good one. Yeah. Fantastic. Brilliant. I've just got a few more questions for you, Jane, we'll finish up today. But very quickly, I want to get in your other short film, which is I Called You, which again, I've been lucky enough to see, and it's really, it's very eerie and quite dark and everything, but it's beautifully, beautifully done. I won't say too much about it because I know it's on the circuit, short film circus at the moment. So, what can you tell us about that?
So I Called You is a psychological thriller, and it came about um, because the writer and the producer and I were having conversations around the experience of living with hashtag fun topic, the fear of male violence. And the writer had a concept for a bigger story, and the producer very cleverly said, "Well, we could make a small short film if you pick your favorite bit." So we picked a bit that we thought could stand alone, and we made that bit. So it is part of a bigger world and character journey. But in brief, it's about a woman who has come home from a night out and she thinks someone broke into her home, that there might be an intruder. So she's called the police, and it's a scene between her and two female police detectives, and they're trying to figure out what's the most likely thing. Is it more likely that someone has broken in and have they can't find any signs of that, or is it likely that this is some sort of cry for help, and what sort of help does she need? So it's a big question about how whether they can believe her or not. And she's not a very good victim in the sense that she kind of lies a bit and she's a bit inconsistent and she's been drinking, so she doesn't remember things very well. So yeah, it just looks at like the experience of fear and whether there's someone who has followed her home.
Yeah. It really plays on the imagination, doesn't it? And the that part of your brain which is like in fight or flight mode in a way that are they there? Are they not there? And with us as an audience, the journey we go on is to find out is that person there or is he not there?
Yeah.
It's really, really interesting.
And it was a totally different type of film and tone compared to Kitchen Tales, and it's dialogue driven and it's just a single timeline. It doesn't jump through time like Kitchen Tales does. So yeah, so it's been really interesting, and it's much shorter. It's only 6 minutes, but it's now going to festivals. So it was on in Birmingham, and it's been in a couple of festivals in Ireland, and it's going to New York. And yeah, so we'll see where else it goes.
Yeah. Well, best of luck with it. I'm sure it's going to be great. And Kitchen Tales, I'm sure, will do exactly the same. It could be amazing stuff. Cool. Just a last few questions for you, Jane. I suppose one really quick one to start with is what's next for you? What do you want to do next?
What's actually next literally is I'm working with Stephen Daldry and Justin Martin again on a new play called Kyoto. That's about the Kyoto Climate Protocol and the journey to get there, and one man who tried to sabotage it. And that's written by Joe Murphy and Joe Robertson. That's going to be on at the Royal Shakespeare Company this summer.
Very
So
nice.
we're going to go into rehearsals for that. We've been doing some workshops which have been really useful because it's grappling with a lot of history and politics and different countries and languages, and yeah, trying to make that all really clear. So, and that's fun. That's just a great group of people to be working with. I've got a couple of screen films, film and short feature film and short film like in development. So there's a lot of funding applications, Oliver Gower. That takes up a lot of time and a lot of pitching. And I've recently just started the process of adapting a book, which will hopefully become a musical. But anyway, I'm not going to say much about that yet because it's
Okay.
like the early days. And yeah, I just want to continue to work across both stage and screen, basically. So I feel really lucky that I continue to work with Justin and with Stephen, and I'm also have various plays that I want to direct that are hopefully going to be coming up next year. And then yeah, film, and I'd love to do some television actually. I got to do a little bit with Justin on his production, his series called The Lovers, which filmed in Belfast and was out last year, and that was I had a really good time on it.
Yeah.
Because I got to do just some lovely things like rehearse with the actors and go on set and help out and watch some cuts of the edit, and yeah, it was good.
Brilliant. I look forward to the musical. It's going to be good.
I mean, it'll take some time. But like we're literally at the beginning of like, right, who's going to write this thing?
Or
Yeah,
Kyoto, yeah, well, definitely. But Kyoto, I'll definitely keep an eye on. I'll come see it over the summer. It's going to be good. It sounds
great.
good. Anyway,
And in theatre in June, July.
cool. Yeah, in Stratford, right?
Correct.
Brilliant. So, last two questions for you. As a bit later on, but I'm glad I'm going to get this one in. Is what was it like going from being an associate director to the commander in chief, being the main director with your own stuff?
Well, I've kind of gone back and forth over my career. So I
Okay.
did start like directing stuff on the fringe and then doing some assistant and associate work, and I would go back and forth. So I'm always trying to do my own work as well as doing um associate work on bigger shows. And ultimately, I suppose, yeah, my own work. I want to get up to the scale of the work that I'm doing as an associate.
Mm,
Um, but I think it's really important to be doing your own projects while you're an assistant or an associate, because otherwise you're not really developing your own voice as a director. But there's so much. I mean, I've had a really great time working with more experienced directors and
yeah.
learned a lot from them. And also then you get to work with the best actors and designers and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
um yeah, I definitely learned a lot. And then there, that people can be really good for mentoring and advising you and stuff as well. But at heart, I feel like I'm a director, and so sometimes it's a bit unnatural to be in a supporting role to somebody because you're like, that's not how I would do it. But you just, try and filter that into a way that is most productive and helpful for the production.
Yeah.
And I find that quickly goes away because it's just not sustainable to hold on to your own version of a show when the other version is actually happening. So at a certain point, I forget what I would have done were it my show. Do you know what I mean? So
Yeah. Of course. Of
yeah,
course.
but you do, but and also like there's a reason it's me that's working with them, and that my taste does impact. They want to hear from me, but it's not the dominant vision. Yeah.
Yeah. Fantastic. And so those are the last two questions for you, Jane. And one is, what would you say was a piece of advice that you wish you heard when you were starting out?
Personally, and maybe somebody did say something like this to me, but not to wait for permission. Like there isn't a right moment, or there isn't like a golden ticket that someone's going to give you that suddenly creates opportunities for you. Um, and I feel like uh, I don't know, is it a personality thing? Is it a cultural thing? There's a lot of like kind of tall poppy syndrome with Irish. I don't know, like, oh, don't get too big for your boots kind of thing.
Mm.
Um, or having good role models, or is it a female thing, or is it a people pleasing thing? I don't know. But like I feel like I used to kind of think, oh well, I can't do that because I'm not the right person, or I got enough experience, or no one wants to give me a slot at their theater or whatever. And actually it's about now I'm much more um willing to try to initiate and make stuff happen myself, even if that means I'm kind of doing a bit of producerial legwork at the beginning and then finding the right collaborators. But yeah, don't wait for permission.
Mm.
Mm.
Yeah, that's good. And I think something you mentioned there as well, learning from people who are better at the job than you are in that moment as well. You know, you work with an actor who's in your case, work with a director who's better than you. Then you can learn their tricks, and then you can be the one that other people want to learn from, in a way. So it's like dropping the ego in a way, and really listening to people who've done it before. I think is a really good thing as well.
Yeah, and trust your gut. Like if you think someone is talented, it doesn't matter that they don't have all the credentials. So there's been times where I've kind of gone, oh, well, that person's never done such and such a thing before, or they've only done a little bit, but I think they're really good, and to actually go and work with them. And then the next thing you know, they will be the person, and so if like trust your taste and trust your gut, will be another.
Exactly. Exactly. No, I like that. That's great. That's really, really good. And finally, last question. What's been an experience or experiences you've had in your career up to this point that you're never ever gonna forget?
I think some of them we've talked about on
Mm.
this. One fun moment I remember is I was assisting at the RSC for the first time, and one of the lead actors got really sick during tech. It was just the last session of tech, and thankfully afterwards it was fine. But I had to stand in so that they could tech the end of the show. And it was like a Christmas show, and everyone's singing, and everyone's got their position on stage. So I'm like sitting on the stage in his position, and they're all singing, and the snow starts falling, and it sounds beautiful, and it comes to the end of the music, and suddenly everyone's laughing, and I was like, oh, why is everyone laughing? And I looked around, and I was the only person that the snow had fallen on, so I was covered in snow, and the rest of the stage was completely bare. And I just, yeah, it was just because, it had been a stressful session because the actor was sick and people were worried and were we going to get to the end of the show? So it was a nice moment of levity and tenderness. Um, yeah, so I remember that. And then in film, I guess I remember a couple of things from Kitchen Tales, and by virtue of it being my first, that's why I think I find you on better. But I, at the beginning, struggled to say the word cut. I didn't feel like I had. I don't know why. We can have a psychiatrist share session on that. But I just turned to the first AD and I said, "That's grand, thanks." And then the DOP was like, "Jane, to be fair, like you need to say cut, you need to say cut." So then I got it. But then to counteract that, there was a moment where the gaffer, we were chatting, and then he turned around. This was on the second or third day of shooting, and he was like, "Oh, this is your first film. I would never have guessed." And I just was really, really smug about that because, of course, it was a very experienced crew and gaffer. And I just thought, oh, well, I'm tricking them into thinking I'm an experienced film director, so I must be doing something wrong.
Yeah.
So that will stay because my ego wants it to stay in my memory.
Of course it could stay. Of course it could.
I remember my life in shows. I go, oh, 2014, oh, that was the year, blah, blah, blah. Or, oh, 2018, oh, that show was, like,
Mm.
so, yeah.
Amazing. Brilliant. Jane, this has been so much fun. Thank you so, so much for your time today. It's been amazing to hear more about Prima Facie and, of course, your amazing career as well in your films and everything. Uh, I can't wait to see what more you do. I can't wait for your feature film to come out in the next few years.
Keep an eye.
I'll keep an eye.
Tell me any day now.
No, seriously, I've watched your films and everything. They're absolutely beautiful. The way you are able to capture those stories, both from a family perspective or from a slightly darker perspective in terms of I Called You, was really, really clear and really, really just beautifully done. And I encourage everyone who's watching or listening to this to go and check out Jane's stuff. Again, as I said, link is down below. Go check out her stuff and keep an eye out on her latest stuff that's going to come out over the next few years. And yeah, remember the name, Jane Moriarty. And of course, no, she doesn't have a brother called, oh God, what's his bloody name?
Moriarty from Sherlock.
Moriarty. Yeah, James. He doesn't have a brother called James or anything, so don't worry about that. Yeah, I don't know where that came from. But yeah, but
It's a good reference for a lot of people for the name Moriarty.
yeah.
I think the Benedict Cumberbatch Sherlock was kind of in its heyday when I moved to London. So
Mm.
I used to get a lot of like raised eyebrows when I'd be like collecting my tickets at box office and I'd say, Moriarty. And they'd be like, oh.
Oh, no, it's brilliant. No, I don't know. On that note, I think that's a good point to finish on. Jane, yeah, you're amazing. Your work you do is incredible, and it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you today. And thank you very, very, very much for your time. If you just hang on, I'll finish the recording. We'll have a little debrief afterwards. All that's left for me to say is, guys, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. This has been the Uncensored Critic podcast. And I'll be back very, very soon. Thank you as always for tuning in. And for the final time, and Jane, I'd love to have you back. I've still got so many more questions for you. Let's do this again. Take it easy, guys, and I'll see you very soon. And Jane, thank you so much.